you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today is going to be the update to the burn build, the Magicka Dragonknight for the Harrowstorm DLC. Now this has been very successful on the channel for an extremely long time and its design hasn't really changed. It supplies a high amount of single target damage, it doesn't require any trial loot whatsoever, although there are options and I will get to those in the gear section. And of course our sustain is solid. You don't have to sit there holding heavy attack all day long. This is absolutely fine and that's all part of the rotation as well. We'll get to that a bit later, but first of all, we're going to go into the stats. We are sitting on 38k max Magicka, 18k max health, which is really high for a mag DK, 10k max stamina, 864 recovery, don't worry, our sustain is covered by our rotation, 61.2% crit chance, with, at the moment, 2.6k spell damage, but that will go way, way up. There's a couple of different variations to the setup, but you can crack way over 5.5k in trials with all your bonuses and buffs and such, depending on which version of the build you take. 64 points into max Magicka. We don't need any health or stamina because we've got that covered anyway. We are using max health, max magic food, the flat stuff. And when you get to the very end, you can see the combat metrics part, you'll see that the flat food is there as well. We're using the Shadow Munderstone, and of course we're a stage 4 vampire. This can be changed. You don't have to have it if you don't want to, but I will explain it in the passives. Again, just to make sure you know which food we're using, we actually have this stuff here. This is what we're using. Basic, blue, flat stat, health, and magic. Now, I'm going to go into the skills in detail. I'll explain where they all come from, what you need to do to change them, in terms of morphs, how they're applied, and all that good stuff. There'll be a demonstration on the right-hand side as well of each individual skill. But if you want to skip this, if you already know it all, that's of course fine. But if you do so, and you ask questions in the comment section below that have already been answered, those questions will be obviously ignored because I've explained it once already. Again, it's at your own risk. It's entirely up to you. Now, first up, of course, is Burning Embers. This is in the Ardent Flame skill line. Second ability you unlock starts off as Searing Strike. Morph it to Burning Embers. Now, this is very straightforward. This is a single target damage over time. It does an initial flame hit, and then it does flame damage for 14 seconds. Now, when this runs out, this will give you a heal equivalent of 75% of the damage done. Now, the heal can't crit, but the damage can. So it calculates how much has been done and gives you a heal to benefit, obviously, yourself for using this skill. But it's not just if it runs out. It's if it's reapplied as well. So if you activate this again on the target, the old dot is now gone. And the damage done by it will heal you. So you can use it tactically to give yourself a heal as and when you need to and just keep the dot running. Or you can let it run out and just take the heal at the end passively. It's entirely up to you, but this is very strong. Keep it on the target at all times. Do not let it run out because this will keep you alive as well as doing a lot of damage. And finally, when the initial hit is activated, so when you put the skill on the target to start with, you can put this on multiple targets, by the way, but it's individual, so it will take multiple casts. When you put the initial hit down, this will guarantee a burn-in status effect on the target. We're going to get to passives and stuff later about how important that is, and we'll also talk about some gear as to how important that is as well, but a burn-in status effect is usually a chance, while doing fire damage, to add an extra 3-second damage over time of fire damage to the target. This comes with it. So technically, this is 2 dots. 1 for 3 seconds and 1 for 14, and yes, they stack. Next up, of course, is Trap Beast, which is actually morphed to Barb Trap. This is in our Fighters Guild skill line. This is the last ability to unlock in the Fighters Guild, so it does take a long time to get to. You need Fighters Guild 8. Starts off as Trap Beast, morph it to Barbed Trap. This is very simple. It goes on the ground underneath the target. If it is not a boss, it can be immobilized for 2 seconds, and it will stand still, obviously, and it will take damage over time. If it is a boss, it won't be immobilized, and it will still take damage over time. But the damage over time is not what we're looking at here. While the damage over time is active, if anything has been affected by this, you will gain minor force for the whole duration of the skill. Which means for 18 seconds, we have 10% increase to all crit damage that we do. This is essential. Do not let it run out. Next up is Inner Light. Now this is a flex slot, which is going to become a lot easier to swap out if you have a certain setup. So we're not going to go over the flex slot just yet. We'll do that in the gear. But for now, this is a passive bonus that stays on our bar and can swap to another defensive skill if we want to. Offensive, like I said, is coming later. It's in a Mage's Guild skill line. It's called Mage Light to start with. Morph it to Inner Light. It's the first ability you unlock. You only need Mage's Guild level 2 to get this. Now, what this does is irrelevant. Don't cast it. This ability here, where you make people visible, completely ignore it. Look at the second paragraph instead. This gives you 5% increased max magicka, and it will give you 10% crit rating, so chance to crit, just for having it on your bar. All you need to do is put it there and leave it there. However, if you find you're a little bit too squishy, or sometimes you need some protection, you can go into the light armor skill line, and you can get Harness Magicka, which will give you a damage shield. You can put this there instead. Yes, you'll lose the max magic bonus, so your damage will go down slightly, but you will have a protection ability instead. This starts off as annulment, morph it to Harness Magicka. If you get hit by magic abilities, you'll absorb it and obviously get magic back, as long as the shield persists for up to 3 hits. If not, it will just take damage instead of your health for the time that it's actually up, or for the strength of the shield itself. Bear in mind, of course, this is capped at your maximum health of 50%, so the more health you have, obviously, the better, but this won't go any higher than half of your maximum health, regardless of buffs and bonuses. In Trials, this can go up to about 10 or 11k. Again, this is here for passives, for extra damage output. This is here for protection. The damage skill that we can put here instead, if you're feeling extra squishy and you think you can manage it, we will go over when we get to the gear, because it's only relevant to a certain setup. Now, next up, of course, is Unrelenting Grip. Why is this? I will explain this more in the rotation, but this is a very, very, very beneficial skill. And for those of you that don't like me saying very, very, very tough, this is important. Pay attention. This does initial damage when you hit the target with it, which is actually pretty strong, especially when you stack up your bonuses. And you will be given Major Expedition for 4 seconds after activating this. And it will chain the target to you. Now, if you're in content where you are fighting a boss, you can't pull the target anyway, so it doesn't matter, you're just getting damage out of it. If you are versus ads, and you personally can place your feet where the tank is going to really respect the fact that you're pulling stuff in, then you can be a big benefit to the group, because you can pull stuff in for the tank. They don't have to worry so much about their sustain, and all they've got to do is just talon stuff up, or root it, or whatever you want to call it, because you're doing the hard work for them. You're doing damage and position and stuff to help them. If you can't help them, obviously don't use this skill until everything's in place. Here's the game changer. If your target cannot be pulled, so if it's already been pulled and it's now immune to CC, or it's a boss, or a mini-boss, or an elite enemy, whatever you want to call them, because they can't be pulled, you are doing damage, you are activating the ability, but you get the magic back. So this becomes a spammable for free. And it can't be dodged either, or reflected. So in the face of the enemy, you can spam this, do a decent amount of damage, and it's free, and you get a speed buff if you need it. If it's not a boss, you actually get to pull stuff in to the place where you want it, because you need to be close because of how the build is set up. So it's win-win. Instead of having to run over to something, or the tank struggling to pull stuff in, you pull it, it's where you want it. Tank's happy, all he's got to do is pin it. If it's not pullable, free spammable. This is going to make a lot more sense when it comes to the rotation, because there's a few very important reasons why this is here. But just bear in mind, of course, those rules. If you pull it and it can be pulled, it will come to your feet. So your position is key here. Make sure you're close to the tank. If you pull it and it can't be pulled, it's a free spammable. Starts off as Fiery Grip, by the way. Morph it to Unrelenting Grip. The other one will pull you to the target. You don't want to do that. Now here is our main spammable. And this one will now start making a bit more sense. Molten Whip will actually hit the target with a whip effect and do damage. A little bit more than the chains, flat out, but it will do damage. Now, while pulling stuff in, if the tank now immobilizes the targets and they're all pinned and nice and comfy, you will actually set them off balance, which is a benefit to your group. You will actually increase their overall damage output if they have their champion points in a set area. And of course, everyone that heavy attacks that target will get double resources back and do 70% more damage with a heavy attack, as will you. So that's a bonus flat out. Flat damage for the hit, and you can knock stuff off balance, which helps. And while slotted, listen to this very, very carefully, because it's a very unique ability. Whenever you activate a different Ardent Flame ability, you gain a stack of Seething Fury, which increases the damage of your next Molten Whip, this ability, by 33%, and increases your weapon and spell damage by 75 for 5 seconds. This effect can stack up to 3 times. So, what you need to do is you need to stack up 3 Seething Fury in order to get the maximum out of this, and then the third bonus will give you a massive backflip whip. So this big one here, or this normal one here actually, will be much, much stronger, 33% stronger in fact, if you can stack that up 3 times. But you have to use 3 Ardent Flame abilities that are different to the whip, because this consumes it. So what do? You don't spam this, because that's a dot. That's wasted. You don't spam a dot, you leave it running. You spam this. This is a single target spammable. You hit this 3 times, you'll have Siphon Fury maxed to 3, and then you get the big whip. So although this flat out is slightly stronger than this, you will benefit from a much stronger whip for using this instead. So you hit this 3 times, then a whip. Hit this 3 times, then a whip. And your overall damage application is not only sustainable because it's free magic, you get it back if the target can't be moved, but you also get this too. And also, while you're stacking these up, your spell damage goes up until it's consumed with Siphon Fury. So all the rest of your abilities that are already running get a boost. So while you're doing this, light attack, chains, light attack, chains, light attack, chains inside your rotation, everything else running is currently higher in damage output. So the balance between spamming this and never getting that special whip and spamming this 3 times and taking the special one actually benefits us throughout in both damage output and sustain. That will make more sense when I get to the rotation because you'll be able to physically see it, but it's really, really helpful. Now just bear in mind, of course, since we haven't got to where things come from, Molten Whip is in the Ardent Flame skill line, so first ability to unlock starts off as Lava Whip, morph it to Molten Whip. Yes, the other one does do special backflips during off balance and gives you a heal, but this one is a lot more tactical and honestly a lot easier to sustain with this system in place. The other whip doesn't give you Siphon Fury, so you don't have this mechanic at all. Now, the ultimate is of course Shooting Star. This is not used at all unless we're really low on resources and we have to use it. That will make sense when we get to the passives, but this is from the Mage's Guild skill line. It's level 10 in the Mage's Guild to unlock this. Starts off as Meteor, morph it to Shooting Star for 2 reasons. 1, because it's flame damage and we excel at that, and 2, because you get ultimate back for every single target that you hit with the initial landing of the Meteor. The actual application and damage output of this isn't the main selling point for this ultimate. It's mostly just there for stats, but if you are in trouble, you can of course use this and just fire it out and get some resources back, or just do some damage, whichever. Now if you don't have Mage's Guild 10, don't worry, you can go to the Earth and Heart skill line, get Magma Armor, morph it to Magma Shell, and this becomes your oh shit button, where for 10 seconds you're borderline immortal apart from one-shot mechanics. You will only take 3% of your maximum health from every single damage source you take, again, unless it's a one-shot. So this can be your nice protection spell on your front bar, if you don't have Shooting Star. Now on the back bar we have double barred of course the Molten Whip, because we want to make sure we take advantage of the stacks of Siphon Fury and they don't run out if we can help it. We are stacking them to use them, stacking them to use them. We don't want them to just sit there doing nothing. So on the back bar, our Ardent Flame abilities that we do have will also contribute towards this for being here. If you don't have the whip on the bar, you won't get it. So we have these on the front, which makes this happen, and we have these on the back, which makes this happen, but we're getting to those in a moment. Next up, of course, is the Destruction Staff skill line. In fact, Unstable Wall of Elements. Starts off as Wall of Elements, morph it to Unstable Wall of Elements. The second ability you unlock, and it's called Unstable Wall of Fire because we're using a Flame Staff. Now, this will do damage over time for all targets caught inside of it, and any that are burning, whether you did it or not, will actually take 20% more damage from this ability, and then when the ability runs out or is reapplied, it will explode. Now, just bear in mind, of course, this here does apply a guaranteed burn and status effect when you first put it on, so this will increase straight away. Very important to note. Keep it in your rotation 100% of the time, by the way. Never let it run out. It's really important, especially for our back bar weapon. Engulfing Flames is next. This is in our Ardent Flame skill line. This is the third ability to unlock. Starts off as Fiery Breath, morph it to Engulfing Flames. This is really simple, although most people misunderstand it. This makes you breathe fire, basically, and enemies caught by it initially will take a damage hit straight away. Then they will be attached or affected with a damage over time. They are burning, on fire, and dying. Now, while this is active, which is a 14-second timer, by the way, it's very long. While this is active, the enemies affected by it will have all flame damage done to them increased by 10%. That's not just you, that's everybody else too. Now, the current value is 8%. Why is that? Because at the moment, we don't have our buffs on. If you have your buffs and bonuses on, you need to make sure that you have at least 3,000 spell damage. Every 1% of this is 300 spell damage. We actually crack way over 5 when we're actually buffed and all that good stuff, so that's not a problem. But if you are lower and you never reach 3, this is going to be less effective. Just bear in mind, of course, if this runs out, everybody loses their fire damage bonus, including you. Just bear in mind, of course, when you are testing on a dummy and you are simulating the fact that you have some trial buffs, because they're not all there, then this is on it. This will increase all of your flame damage by 10%. So if you are not a Dragon Knight right now, but you are using fire damage and Zarn and all this other stuff, which does fire damage, they're all increased because of this buff. If you're claiming that that is how much you can do in content, just bear in mind that's only on the condition that you have a mag DK in your group. This is a very strong ability, but you must have a mag DK with at least 3k spell damage present in order for everyone to take advantage of it. Now, next up is Flames of Oblivion. This starts off as Inferno. It takes a while to unlock this, but this actually makes 2 fireballs surround you, and they do damage every 5 seconds for 15. So once every 15 seconds, they'll both fire. Now, one of each will hit 2 different enemies. So if you've got 1 enemy, you'll only fire 1 ball. If you've got 2 enemies, you'll fire 2 in 2 different directions. Closest enemies first. This also gives you Major Savagery and Prophecy for being on your bar, although we're not really using it for that. It is quite helpful if you're using Trash Pots. But this scales off of your highest offensive stats. So if you're built for Stamina, this will scale off of Stamina stats. If you're built for Magicka, obviously we are, it will scale off of that. It's very cheap as well. You don't need to spam it. Just keep it running in your rotation. You'll be just fine. Next up is Eruption. Now this is in our Earth and Heart skill line. 5th ability unlocked. It takes some time to get here. You're going to need to put some of these on your bar. But starts off as Ash Cloud, morph it to Eruption, not the other one. The other one is a heal. Now this does last a very long time. It's quite expensive too, but this is for a very good reason. This has an 18-second damage over time. It snares the targets inside of here by a whopping 70% and does flame damage every 1 second and does an initial hit in area of effect as well. Basically keep this on the ground. Do not let it run out if you can help it, and if it does run out, don't panic, but get it back on as soon as possible. This is a very beneficial skill, not just for its damage output and application, but also for our passives as well, which are coming up shortly. This also is very important. Standard of Might is in our Ardent Flame skill line. Now, if you haven't noticed already, on our front bar we have Burning Embers, Chains, and Whip. We also have Engulfing Flames and Oblivion on the back bar, along with the ultimate. In the Ardent Flame skill line, we are using every single ability in our damage skill line. All of them. Every single one. This starts off as Dragon Knight Standard, morph it to Standard of Might, if you want to. Now that, I'm getting to in a minute. This will put a banner on the ground, and it will do damage in area of effect every 1 second for a whopping 20 seconds, and it will major defile all the targets, making sure that the healing received and health recovery is reduced. At the same time, for standing in the area of effect, you will increase your damage output by 15% and reduce the amount of damage you take. Enemies, of course, inside of this area can be hit with a synergy effect from people in your group that will shackle them to the banner in the middle, hold them still, and do flame damage, which is pretty nasty. A 5-second immobilization is very, very nice, especially since that your whip knock immobilized people off balance. So that can benefit everyone. Don't miss that synergy if you are not a DK and someone puts his banner down. Now, the reason I said you can choose this if you want to is because, although this is your main ultimate and should be used at all times, you can use a different morph to this. Shift and Standard is the other morph. It doesn't have the 15% increase to damage or reduction to damage, but it does have the same damage over time, and it does last a lot longer. It actually lasts 29 seconds, and in testing I can get this to almost the same damage, give or take about 500 and a full kill, which is nothing. That's the difference between critting and not critting on a dot. And the fact that it can be moved means that you can not only just place it in the fight you're in, if the fight moves, you can take it with you. So there is a choice where you can actually use the other morph instead of this one. But for this basic setup, I wouldn't. With the alternate setup, I quite possibly would. But we're going to get to that again. When we get to the gear, it will make a lot more sense when we get there. So, in a nutshell, get this version for now. Always use it as soon as you can. And make sure that your damage is already applied. You must have dots on the target or on the ground before you apply this, otherwise you're just firing a blank banner. Sure, it does damage in area of effect, but you want this increase to your skills to actually start benefiting you straight away. If you put this down blank, then fire skills, yes, the skills you fire are going to be increased. But if you already have skills running, as soon as this banner lands, they all heighten. Efficiency. Put this down once stuff is already running. Now we're going to get to the passives, and some of this will start to make a bit more sense. First of all, combustion is stupidly overpowered, and we need to make sure we understand this. This increases the damage of your burning and poison status effects by 50%. As a Dragon Knight, we have the strongest burning passives in the game. Because everybody else that gets burning just does a basic 3-second damage over time, which guarantees from this skill, for us, it's stronger. Not only that, when you apply a burning status effect, which can be chance from other skills as well, so you can reapply, every time you reapply one successfully, you will get 500 magic back. So if there is a damage over time on the ground, for example, and 3 enemies all of a sudden all set on fire and they're burning, this will increase in damage, and you will get the passive here for an extra 1,500 magic back. This is just a very small example. It can get more extreme. When you deal direct damage with an Ardent Flame ability, you reduce a target's movement speed. Not only do you pull them in with this, not only do you hit them with this with direct damage, but you slow them down as well. This is direct as well, and so is the initial hit on this one. And so is the initial hit on the Flame Breath, and so is Flames of Oblivion. So everything we do basically can slow down the target. It's not massive, but it helps things to stop running away too quickly. Increases the damage over time of Fiery Breath and Searing Strike and Dragon Knight standard abilities by 33% and the duration by 4 seconds. So this breath, the ultimate, and the Burning Embers are all 4 seconds longer than their base, which is 10 seconds here and 16 here, because of this passive. Make sure you get it, and of course the damage output is stronger too. This increases the damage of your Flame Area of Effect abilities by 6% and decreases the cost of all your Stamina Poison abilities. We're not using any Poison abilities, but we are using Flame Area of Effect. So, this here, this here, this here, and this here. They are all affected. All increased. Draconic Power is not massively important, although we will need to take into consideration some of them are going to be needed. This is important, of course, because it increases the amount of damage you can block. That helps us survive. Get it? Now, this is not important unless you have a Draconic Power ability active. If you do, your Hidden Received is increased. We are not using any abilities in this skill line. However, we are going to go over some options when we get to gear, so you may want this passive just in case you choose to do that. This increases your health recovery for each ability of this skill line slotted. Again, we don't have any, so you won't necessarily need that unless we do change a skill out. But you do want this passive anyway, because the second bonus is beneficial to us no matter what. Any melee ranged attacks will actually have a 2-meter increase over the 5-meter range. So this here should be 5 meters, but it's not. It's 7. So you can step back a little bit. You don't actually have to be on top of the enemy. And, of course, our whip as well is also 7 meters. So to start with, it's quite short range, but once you've got this passive, it's actually quite healthy. And you can step back a little bit if you have to. Maybe there's some red on the floor and you've got to move back a bit, and you can still reach with your stuff. This increases your spell resistance by 3300. Speaks for itself. Get it. Earthen Heart's incredibly important. This will increase the duration of your Earthen Heart abilities by 20%. So, this is 18 seconds, not less. And your Magma Shell is 12 seconds, not 10. This will give you resources back for using an ultimate. So every single ultimate you use will give you 46 health, magic, and stamina back for each point cost. So, this one on the front bar is 200. This one on the back is 250. This will give us more resources back and is more useful to us. Use this as much as you can. Unless you don't have enough for it, you're in trouble. The enemy's almost dead. You have to use something. Maybe you've not got enough resources left to do anything. Then you can pop this instead. When you cast an Earthen Heart ability, you and your group gain minor brutality for 20 seconds, increasing their weapon damage. So with this ability, you increase everyone's fire damage by 10%. And this ability, because it's Earthen Heart, you increase everybody's weapon damage by 10%. So you're helping out the staminas. Also, when you activate this ability or anything from the Earthen Heart skill line, you will actually generate 3 ultimate, and that can happen once every 6 seconds. We're going to use this every 2 rotations or every 1 rotation, depending on which setup you're using, which means every time we cast it, basically, we are going to get this passive. We have 100% uptime on minor brutality, basically. The whole group is buffed, you get ultimate back, everybody's happy. Also, when you cast a non-stamina casting Earthen Heart ability, you restore 990 stamina. So when you activate this with Magicka, you get almost 1k stamina back. That is a very useful passive to understand, because if you are very low on stamina, which you shouldn't be, but you might be, you can activate this a few times, watch your magic sustain, and get stamina back. That might be the difference between you being able to and not able to block a heavy attack. Destruction staff, of course, you want every single one of these. Trifocus is very important because if you do have to heavy attack, of course, that initial heavy attack will be 12% stronger, so that's helpful for flame staff, by the way. This will go through the enemy's spell resistance by 10% for your destruction staff abilities, so your light attacks, your heavy attacks, and your wall of elements. This will increase your chance to apply burn and status effect. Now, this one is guaranteed, so that doesn't affect it. But every tick of damage you do with fire, or any damage you do with fire, will have a chance to apply another burning status effect. So it can override the old one and give you magic back. This makes it so that we have a heightened chance over any other weapons with these particular types of effects. So this is very important. Status effect, there is a video in the description actually explaining how they all work. This is important, of course, for having a flame staff equipped. Your single target damage abilities are increased by 8%. Now, this is area of effect, so is this, so is this. So is the banner, so none of those are affected. Flames of Oblivion, however, the whip, the chain, and burning embers, and even the beast trap if you like, are affected. Now, of course, finally, if you do kill something with a Destro staff ability, light attack, heavy attack, or a skill, you will get 3,600 Magicka back. That does actually make a big, big difference. The light armor, of course, you want to get every single one of these. We are using 5 pieces, which will give us access to this shield if you want to use it. But this will reduce the effectiveness of snares per piece worn and reduce the cost of sprinting. We don't have a lot of stamina as a Magicka build, so it does help that we get the cost down for these things. And, of course, snares are quite awkward for us, so it does help that we are obviously not quite as slow. This increases your mag recovery per piece worn, plus reduction to cost for skills as well. This increases your spell resistance. This will increase your crit chance, and this will give you 4884 spell penetration. Targets in PvE traditionally have 18,200, so 18,200 in terms of resistances. What you need to do as far as penetration is concerned between you, your stats, and your group is get that down to 0. This is a massive boost at base for us. It's really helpful. We're using 1 piece of medium sometimes, depending on the setup. You've heard me say that several times in the video already. There are 2 different setups, 2 major setups anyway. You will want this one, which increases your stam recovery. We are using a beast trap. We obviously want recovery so we can still block and dodge, and we get the cost down as well. And you will want athletics as well, which increases your movement speed while sprinting, and of course reduce the cost of dodge roll. This is more a very small bonus to sustain for that particular bar, but we are going to need them. The rest of them don't bother with unless you really, really want to, and agility is not necessary anyway because we don't have 5 pieces. Heavy armor, you are going to not need these 2 because they're 5 pieces only, but these 3, make sure you get them all. We're only using 1 piece of heavy for now. You can use 2. But for the 1 piece, we actually get an increased resistance bonus. We get magic and stand back for being hit once every 4 seconds, and we have an increase to max health. We are a stage 4 vampire. You don't have to be if you don't want to, but for being stage 2 or above, you get an increase to 10% magicka and stamina. Just for being a vampire, you don't have to do anything. And at stage 3 or higher, any damage you take while under 50% health will be less. And the lower your health goes, the less damage you take, up to a 33% reduction. You're tankier at lower health to give you that increased survival chance, which means your healers have less of a struggle. It's very helpful indeed. Now, Fighter's Guild, of course, you do want a couple of these. This will get the cost of Beast Trap down, so make sure you get Intimidating Presence. This isn't hugely essential because it only really affects on the front bar anyway, and it increases the weapon damage for having the Fighter's Guild ability slotted. Our weapon damage is quite low. We're not doing physical damage that much, but it will minor increase this if you really want to be picky, if you've got the spare points. But you don't actually need this one. This one, however, you do need. You will get 9 ultimate back for the privilege of killing undead, Daedra, or werewolf if you're the one with the kill and blow. Get this, you'll build ultimate really fast, then you can use an ultimate and get resources back, and obviously do more damage. Very helpful. This increases your Fighter's Guild abilities against targets that are of undead, Daedra, or werewolves types. But again, this is a nitpicky skill. You don't really need Slayer or Skill Tracker, but if you've got spare points, then sure, go nuts. Mage's Guild, of course, above all these passives, the one you're actually going to need is this one. This will increase your max magic and recovery by 2% for each ability on your bar. We're using 2. This one here, unless you're using a damage shield, and this one here as well. They're just there for passives. So this bonus will help you, and on the back bar we obviously don't have it, so just don't stay on the back bar too long. Make sure your rotation is clean. Undaunted is essential, of course. This first one here, if you take a synergy, you'll be given 4% of all resources back. That there is a sustain passive. Any synergy you see is free resources. If you're going to take a spear on the dummy every 20 seconds off cooldown indefinitely, because that's how you apparently sustain in content, stop leaving the synergies on the ground in content and actually take them. It's very important that you do so. Everything that you pick up will help you or your group. This is really important as well. For each different type of armor we're wearing, and we're actually wearing 3, 1 heavy, 1 medium, and 5 light, it will give us a 6% increase overall, 2% for each type, for all magic, health, and stamina. So we've got really healthy resources. Just bear in mind, of course, if you take off any type of armor, for example, if we take off a medium and replace it with another heavy, we'll be wearing 5 light and 2 heavy, which is actually 2 different types of armor. So that will go down to 4%. However, your armor passives for heavy armor will give you a 2% increase to health back. So you'll lose stamina and magicka, but you'll get the health the same. Just your choice as to what you do, but just bear in mind what you do have active at the time will reflect this passive. We don't need any of these. We are, of course, a high elf. This is incredibly important and a very overlooked passive. People don't really understand its benefit. They just ignore it and put on channeled acceleration instead. We're using a beast trap. Channeled acceleration costs magicka, beast trap costs stamina. Now, this is cheaper for us already because we have intimidating presence. We also get stamina back for using Earth and Heart ability. Almost 1k. So that's not far off a third of the cost. We also have a stamina recovery bonus for our medium armor passives. We also have a passive bonus to recovery anyway as a character, and we have the vampire passive that can contribute to that on top of it. Our stam sustain is actually pretty good. So instead of wasting extra magicka in our rotation, which for most people is difficult anyway, we use a stamina version of Minor Force. And this passive here, once every 6 seconds, and we don't use a beast trap every 6 seconds. Once every 6 seconds, using a class skill will give you your lowest resource back. 640 of it. So every single rotation, once every 6 seconds this can happen, by the way. Every single rotation, we can guarantee that we can get at least, without recovery, almost 1.7k stamina back. 1.6, 1.7. That's not including your base recovery. We're using class skills all the time, and we're not using a beast trap every 6 seconds. We're not even using it every 12, depending on the rotation. This passive is going to fire a lot more often than you might think, and this is very sustainable, rather than using a magicka ability and having to figure out where we need to weave in a heavy attack or try and change stuff. The beast trap on this particular setup, it's good on other setups too, but on this particular setup is really easy to sustain, and you've got plenty of juice left to dodge, roll, block, and all that good stuff. Really simple. This passive is very helpful for the high elf. Also, if you use a channeled ability, which we are not, you get damage reduction. We don't have any channeled abilities. This one will give you an increase to max magicka, and this one will give you an increase to spell damage. The high elf did perform flat out in terms of its single target damage output for this particular build. Other races were just fine also, but this was my preference overall, not just for this stuff, but also for the beast trap sustain as well. It's really helpful to be able to do that. But if you want to use another race, you can do. It's your choice. It's not going to kill the build. It will still perform fine in absolutely everything. Alchemy, of course, finally, most important passive in the game. We are using spell pots. Potions are consumable buffs. Do not let your buffs run out. Do not use potions just because you're low. Use them all the time. The ones we're using give us major sorcery, major prophecy, and major intellect. This bonus makes them last 47 seconds. 47.6 actually. The cooldown's 45. We have 100% uptime on those really awesome buffs. Do not let it run out. If you don't have this, they'll only last about 35 seconds. You'll have a 10-second gap every cooldown. Don't do that. Now, we're going to go over the gear, and there are choices here. First of all, we're going to go over the basic setup. Then, we're going to go over the slightly more advanced one, or just a change if you prefer it. Bear in mind, by the way, if you're using the old setup, that is still fine. So, first of all, we are using, of course, Burn and Spell with Inferno Staff, imprecise with a weapon and spell damage glyph on the front bar only. The reason for this is the buff carries over if we do swap bars, and there is a cooldown. Now, this says max magicka, spell damage, and spell crit, and when you deal damage with a flame ability, you have a 15% chance to apply a burning status effect. So we have high chance anyway. This has a chance from all flame to actually do that. When it does, your spell damage will be increased by 525 for 8 seconds, and this can happen once every 12. Note it says this can happen once every 12. So as soon as it starts, the cooldown has already started counting down. So there's actually an 8-second uptime, 4-second downtime. You don't want this on the back bar because it fires on the back bar, and then by the time you go around to the front again, it's gone. You've just lost your burst. So we deliberately put this on the front bar only. It is a buff, so it does carry over if it's still ticking over when your timer's done and your rotation's finished. Front bar only. Note, by the way, this comes from a normal dungeon. You don't have to do it on vet. Also, if you're farming for it, don't do what stupid people tell you to do and just go for the chests. Loot all the chests, kill the last boss and loot him, and loot all the adds as well, because weapons and jewelry can drop from trash. It's rare, but it happens. Don't diminish your RNG. It's already bad enough. But you want to flame stuff on the front bar of Burning Spellweave. You can also go with the jewelry as well for the whole 5-piece bonus and make sure every single one of them is bloodthirsty. The jewelry's quite easy to pick up. One of the bosses in there does actually drop a named version of the ring, so you can get a couple of those quite quickly. But you can, of course, use the body pieces instead if you prefer. But 1 staff, which counts as 2 pieces, by the way. Staves count as 2 pieces. And 3 body or 3 jewelry. Back bar is, of course, the Maelstrom Inferno staff with an infused flame glyph. Now, remember, your direct damage, or single target damage, in fact, is actually higher because of the flame staff. That does also count towards your lights and heavy, and this boosts them further. If you don't have this, do not worry. Do not double bar Burning Spellweave. Lucky if you get that anyway. But you can put on a crafted weapon, or a willpower weapon, or anything you've got to hand for now. That will be just fine until you have what you need. But definitely try and get the Inferno staff if you can. Now, we are using Zaan, of course, on the helmet and shoulders. You don't have to. Make sure you got 1 heavy, 1 medium. But you don't have to use this if you don't want to. It does give you a spell crit. It gives you a massive damage over time for a very short period, but it gets progressively stronger per tick by an increase of 50% of the previous one. 5 seconds uptime, 13 seconds down, and applies off of your light and heavy attacks. However, if you prefer, you can go with Groftar. This is much, much easier to get in much, much older content, and you must do Vaults of Madness on Vet to acquire it, by the way. But this gives you a max magic bonus, and instead of hitting the target with a flame breath that will only hit the single target, this will actually do an area of effect fire circle around your character and do damage every 1 second for 5 seconds. And it has a 5-second downtime, so this is a much, much faster proc rate. More uptime and less downtime in comparison to this. But we can make these stronger if you choose to take the other setup, which we're not quite at yet. These are your choices. This one's more difficult to get and mostly single target. This one's much easier to get, supplies lots of AoE. Every tick of damage from either of them can apply a burn and status effect anyway. And of course, just bear in mind they can actually hit similar numbers, because this has a big downtime and could be awkward to proc, whereas this one's much, much easier and is more reliable. Now, the main body set we are using, this must be on you at all times, whether it's jewelry, body, whichever. I don't care which order you put it in, but you don't want this on the weapons. Skaven Mage is back in business. This has been a favorite set for a very, very long time. It was a bit awkward to proc on most setups for a while, but they changed it to now when you deal direct damage, you have a 20% chance to increase your spell damage by 5/16 for 5 seconds. And this can happen once every 5 seconds. So as soon as it runs out, you can actually reapply it again. Before, you had to mess around with direct and crit. Now you don't. It's just direct, and we've got loads of it. This and Burning Spellweave combined is extremely powerful. It stacks a stupid amount of spell damage, and as long as you've got Engulf and Flames running, everybody else's fire damage is guaranteed to be at maximum, because you're never going to make that buff go below 10%. If you're still using Destruction Mastery, that is also still fine, because the flat bonus to max Magicka does also benefit very heavily towards your skills, and the numbers were quite similar, but this one did slightly outperform. So Skaven Mage on the body or jewelry all the time, Divines on everything, 3 jewelry with Bloodthirsty, whichever order you want to put these sets. They're both from dungeons, so you don't need any trials whatsoever, and they're very, very strong. However, if you would like to swap out for some trial stuff, you can, of course, go with, yes, I've tried loads of different stuff, Sororia. Now, this gives you spell damage bonus, minus Slayer increase in all of your damage by 5% for trials, dungeons, and arenas, and you get 1 magic bonus for a normal version of the set, 2 magic bonuses for the perfected, so there's not much in it. But when you deal direct damage with a single target attack, you create a ring of fire underneath yourself. It lasts for 10 seconds. As long as you're standing in it, you keep this bonus as long as you still consistently do damage. And over time, this will stack up spell damage. it will give you 30 spell damage up to 20 times. So it's a massive bonus. Not far off Burn and Spellweave, but a little bit higher. Now, just consider, if you move out of this for too long and don't keep doing damage, or don't reapply it, you will lose all of your stacks and have to start again. And it takes time to build them. So in a single target stack and burn fight, this will give you slightly more spell damage than Burn and Spellweave. Without the crit bonus, by the way, which does actually make a substantial difference sometimes. It can fluctuate. However, if you're in content where you have to move a lot, you could constantly be dropping this bonus. You might be only getting a few stacks every so often, so you're only getting half of the effectiveness of the set. Burn and Spellweave, however, does have a downtime, but the 525 spell damage is always guaranteed. So that's a little tricky. Which one do you choose? This one I would honestly use for stack and burn situations. If it's heavy mechanics, I would go Burn and Spellweave, because you don't have to build them up. You hit with your maximum spell damage straight away as soon as it fires, and it's a lot more reliable in those situations. The choice is honestly 100% yours, but Sororia or Burn and Spellweave on the front bar is entirely up to you. Both actually end up with very, very similar numbers, even in the stack and burn, although Sororia sometimes, because it doesn't have the crit, but it does have the increased spell damage, can get a little bit higher, but then sometimes it goes the other way. Now, while that is a choice, you have one more choice. Your other choice is trying to fit Burn and Spellweave or Sororia, one of the two choices, at the same time as Elfbane. Now, Elfbane will need to go on your jewelry, all bloodthirsty, with spell damage on each, and will need to go on your chest to get the most out of the resistances, but you can put it on any body piece you like. You don't have to have chest, but it helps a lot with a Magicka glyph. And preferably your legs or anywhere else with a Magicka glyph. Now, these are too heavy, so bear in mind, you will now have to change this helmet to light and your shoulder to light. So you now have 5 light and 2 heavy. If you do this, you will get a max magic bonus, a spell damage bonus, and a spell damage bonus. You're losing a lot of crit. A lot of crit. And this will increase the duration of all flame damage over time abilities. So, this instead of being 14 is now 19. This instead of being 20 seconds is now 25. And the other version of it is actually 34. This is now 24 instead of 18. This is 19 instead of 14. This is 15 instead of 10. And burning status effects are no longer 3 seconds, they're now 8. And, finally, just to add insult to injury, Xan now lasts 10 seconds with an 8-second cooldown, instead of lasting 5 with a 13-second cooldown. And Groftar lasts 10 seconds instead of 5, which means you can have 100% uptime on Groftar. This is a choice, and this does alter your rotation, which I'm coming to in a moment after the champion points. Just bear in mind, of course, this was slightly altered recently on PTS because it had to be. This does get progressively stronger every 1 second by 50% of the previous tick, up to 5. At 5, it will stay at its peak, and the last 5 seconds will hit as hard as it possibly can. Because of this set alone, and the burning status effect, in fact, being stupidly overpowered, Elfbane obviously does make these hit very high numbers. But you will have to consider, of course, your rotation will need to change, and you can actually hit similar numbers without it. The Skaven Mage and Sororia, or Skaven Mage and Burn and Spellweave, can actually hit the same numbers as this setup with a different rotation, unless you change a skill. And this is the situation I was talking about earlier. If you change Inner Light to Burning Talons, which is from your Draconic Power skill line, starts off as Dark Talons, morph it to Burning Talons, this is no longer a 4-second damage over time, which is borderline useless. This is now 9 seconds, and it does initial hit as well, and immobilizes targets. Now remember, immobilized targets can go off balance, which means your whip can contribute to that. Immobilize, whip them, off balance, everybody's happy. The difference is, however, this is bloody expensive. To put this in your rotation, an extra 3.6k over 9 seconds is a lot. So, this is the risk that you have to consider. You now don't have a damage shield. You are now a lot squishier because you've got no protection, and your sustain is now worse. Now, I will explain how this works in the rotation if you choose to use it, but that is the trade-off. If you want 4k extra damage, you're going to want to put on the skill and use Elfbane. If you want exactly the same damage as Skaven Mage and Sororia, or Skaven Mage and Bonus Spellweave, you can still use Elfbane. You can still keep this, but you'll just have a much, much longer rotation. And some people may preference that, especially when it comes to taking advantage of your monster helmet, because that is a lot more powerful on its own, rather than the overall rotation itself being particularly stronger. So, now I'm going to go into champion points, then I'm going to explain the rotation in both variations of them. So, here we go. 72 points into Ironclad to reduce the amount of direct damage we take. 64 and 64 into Hardy and Elemental to reduce every other damage type we take by 13%, and 19% reduction to damage over time. Bear in mind, when I went over the stamina sustain for the Beast Trap, if you get stunned and you break free, your next stamina ability is also 80% cheaper, so your Beast Trap is really, really cheap. 19 points into Quick Recovery, so you increase your healing received. And of course, you have the Field Physician passive, so if you're resurrecting someone, then of course you take less damage while doing so. Bear in mind, these champion points here, the red ones specifically, can be altered depending on the content you're in, but this is a very good base for pretty much everything. 44 into Warlord to reduce the cost of break free. 75 in Tenacity to increase the amount of Magicka we get back from our heavy attacks if we need to do so, and also increase recovery. 72 points in Tumbling to reduce the cost of dodge roll, and we've got 4 points left. We'll just put them into block because we're not going to put them anywhere else. And because we've got 75 in this tree, we open up the Treasure Hunter passive, and I'm sure you're going to be farming that burning spell with Inferno Staff, so this means that when you do open any of those chests, you have a chance of higher quality loot. Doesn't mean you're going to get a staff because the game doesn't know you're looking for one, but really crap chests that don't drop sets and all the rest of it have a chance to do so now. 61 in Elfborn to increase our crit damage and crit heals. 49 into Elemental Expert to increase everything that we do, basically, apart from our Beast Trap itself. And 10 points in Spell Erosion to give us the 1k pen, which will basically put us bang on the nose. 9 or 10 points in here will pretty much hit cap if you have all buffs and bonuses applied. 66 points into Master at Arms to increase all of our direct damage, and we have a lot of it. 9 points into Staff Expert for lights and heavies, which also stacks with this as well because they are direct damage. And that opens up the Butcher passive, meaning that we do more damage at Execute. So we have increased light attack damage by 5% under 25% health, and our Bloodthirsty traits on our jewelry also contributes to our damage at Execute as well. Remember, the Dragon Knight doesn't have an Execute, so we need those extra bonuses, so we do more damage alongside everybody else at that point in time. 75 points into Fermentor to increase our damage over time, and of course for having this bonus here, we do open up the Exploiter passive, so if anything is off balance, whether we knock it off or somebody else does, then we do increase all of our damage by 10%. Now the rotation is a lot simpler than you might think. Just remember there are variants to this. So, first of all, we're going to go over the basic variation. The basic one is make sure your Beast Trap is down, and make sure your Flames of Oblivion is running. If you'd like, you can start with 2 of them, just to make sure that you have your Thief and Fury, because remember we've got the whip on the bar. And that will open up your spell damage bonus. As you can see on the bottom there, you can see the 2 eyes. This is what we're looking for. While that's running, you've got the bonus. While it's off, you don't. You must maintain that. So, activate this, have your Beast Trap on. First skill you want to put down is Eruption. Then, Light Attack Breath. Light Attack Wall of Elements, swap bars. We don't want that on those targets. Now while it's running, you want a Light Attack, then Burning Embers. Quite simple. Now, your Seething Fury will be up to 3. So that's when you put the whip. So we'll have this, we have this, we have this running. We've got 2 on the back bar, 1 Ardent Flame on the front, whip is ready, take it. Now we want to build up Seething Fury again. So Light Attack chains 3 times. Watch the 3 sustain, by the way. Light chains, light chains, light chains. We've got 3 Seething Fury, Light Attack, backflip whip. If you don't have Seething Fury, you're going to do these boring ones that don't do as much damage. So remember, chain, 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 whip. Now, that's it. When you swap bars again, you ignore Eruption, because you've already got it running, it's really long. And you just go Light Attack, Flames of Oblivion, Light Attack Breath again to reapply it, Light Attack Wall, swap. Rinse, repeat. Now, I'm going to show you what that actually looks like. Remember, every second rotation you use this, because it lasts a really long time. You don't want to over spam it. Now, we'll prep ourselves again. So Beast Trap is down. Eruption, Light Breath, Light Wall, swap. Light Embers, take the Thief and Fury Whip. Light Chains 3 times, take the Thief and Fury Whip again. Light, Beast Trap, swap. No Eruption, Light Flame, Light Breath, Light Wall, swap. Light Embers, take the Whip. Light Chains 3 times, take the Whip. Light Beast Trap, swap. Second rotation, of course, we want to make sure that our Eruption is down. Take the Whip. 1, 2, 3. We don't want it down this time. Just Flames, just Breath, and then Wall swap. It doesn't matter if you get the Breath or the Flames in the wrong order, but just make sure that you do apply them both. They're both very important. Now, if you are doing the other rotation, if you're doing the one with Elfbane, then you're going to want to extend it, because everything is much, much longer. So the main purpose of that set is to basically stretch the rotation and help more a little bit with your sustain, because you don't have to cast the abilities quite so often, which gives us a bit of a window for our spammable. So we'll reset this dude here, because otherwise I'm going to kill him. And I'll show you how that changes. Remember, it's light attack, burn and embers, light attack, take your whip, light attack, chain 3 times, light attack, whip, light, beast trap, swap. That's it. Rinse, repeat. And every second rotation, use this. However, we're going to use this, again, every second rotation, just like before, but our front bar is going to be extended. So, get everything ready. Beast trap, eruption, light breath, light wall, swap. Light embers, take the whip. Light chain, light chain, light chain, take the whip. Do not beast trap swap. Light chain, light chain, light chain, take the whip. Beast trap swap. Light inferno or flames, light breath, light wall, swap. Light embers, take your whip. Light chain, 2, 3, whip. 1, 2, 3, whip. Light beast trap swap. Eruption needs to be down this time. Eruption, flames, breath, wall, embers, whip. 1, 2, 3, whip. 1, 2, 3, whip. You're basically doubling the rotation on the front bar. Instead of 3 chains in a whip, beast trap swap, it's 3 chains whip, 3 chains whip, beast trap swap. That's all you need to do to change it. Now, if you do choose to use the talons, this is at your own risk, at the expense of trying to get extra damage out of something. But watch your tanks. They might not like it when you immobilize stuff. They might get really pissed off, actually. You chaining stuff in is one thing, but you immobilize them as well. If you're a really good player, that might be helpful. If you're not, it might be annoying. So, it's your choice. By the end of the day, this is basically what you need to do instead. You have the same rotation, except you squeeze this in twice on the front bar. You will need to make sure that you don't over-exaggerate your whip rotation, and make sure you never miss a chain, because otherwise your sustain is going to suffer hard. This is only really going to work if you have someone using Hollow Fang, or even a few of them, because they stack. Now, keep everything ready, just like before. Eruption. Light flames. Wall, swap. Hit this. Hit the whip. Talons. 1 chain. 2, 3, whip. 1 chain. 2, 3, whip. Talons again. Light beast trap swap. So your back bar rotation. Down to front. Once your whip is done, talons again. 1 chain, 2 chain, 3 chain, whip. 1, 2, 3, whip. Talons again. Beast trap swap. So what I did there is after the whip at the beginning, you put the talons up. After the whip at the end, you put the talons up. And that will give you 100% uptime on the skill without going too far over the timer. That will increase your DPS, but it will also mess with your sustain a lot. So in a really good situation where you've got Ellie Drain and all that good stuff as well, and you've got multiple Hollow Fang stacked up, especially if you've got people using the off-balance build with you, you should be fine. Without it, don't even try it. And if you are squishy and you're not very good in content, don't even do it anyway, and make sure you keep up a shield, because you're going to need one. There's a lot of options and choices and changes. There's 2 different rotations, 3 technically if you introduce the claws, but 2 major differences. And the major difference between the 2 is that one has got 3 chains and a whip, the other one's got 3 and a whip, 3 and a whip. Now, I would personally stick with inner light or a shield on the bar. I wouldn't mess things around with claws unless you're really experienced, but the choice is yours. The basic setup is absolutely fine. Elfbane is very expensive at the moment, so if you're not going for that stuff, you can literally just go into dungeons, get bonus bow with Skaven Mage, and you're good to go. You don't need any trial stuff whatsoever, and the numbers are all very, very similar. You're talking 80, 82, even up to 86. 86 is with the Talons, 82 to 83 is without. Just for the sake of the dummy, so you can see exactly what this actually looks like when you're doing it in a full swing. It's very, very straightforward. You get the idea. There's a whip. 1, 2, 3, flip. 1, 2, 3, flip. Beast trap swap. Back bar stuff in rotation. And flip. 1, 2, 3. And you just keep going on and on and on and on. Very straightforward. Now, just in case the Siphon Fury was confusing, on the back bar, this is 1 cast. This is 2. By the time you get to your front bar, this is 3. Take the whip. 3 of these, take the whip. When you go to the back bar, it's 1, 2, swap bars, 3, whip. 1, 2, 3, whip. Keep doing that. You'll never fail that backflip whip. You'll always have the strongest one you can have. So, hopefully that wasn't boring. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I know the Mag DK, as far as kind of skill level, can be quite challenging for some. It does take a lot of paying attention, but hopefully the rotation is simple enough for you to get to grips with it. So first of all, thank you all very, very much for watching. I hugely appreciate the support. If you are not subscribing already, please do hit that button. It is free. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, of course, so you know when I'm uploading videos. And, of course, if you'd like to support outside of the channel, there are some links in the info section for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and, of course, the website XynodeGaming.com, where all the written guides are as well. Once again, thank you all very, very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.